To understand better the significance of the questioning of economic theories we discussed in the last session, let's jump back into the time machine and travel back to post-2008, just before the great financial crisis, which was in fact the biggest since the Great Depression. For hundreds of years before and up to 2008, economics was all about studying nations, companies, and people. Often we refer to them as agents, who use scarce resources, etc. And there were two primary branches of economics being practiced. Those two branches were referred to as macroeconomics and microeconomics. Now, macroeconomics concerns itself with large-scale market systems and the performance, structure, and behavior of economies as a whole. Microeconomics, on the other hand, is more focused on the choices made by individual actors, which means in economics language, firms and individual consumers like you and I. Well, the main point here is that the distinction between these two branches of economics, macro and micro, is increasingly becoming blurred. Even though, for as long as I can remember, business schools had also been teaching neoclassical economics, and that was the dominant way of thinking and promoted the idea to all future managers. And that idea was that the only duty of MBAs going out into business was to maximize shareholder value. So this profit maximization principle formed an important part of neoclassical economic thinking. And it was based on the assumption that companies and individuals have rational expectations, with an emphasis on the word rational. And that rational expectation was to maximize their taste and preferences, or to put it more simply, all people are rational. In addition, neoclassical economic thinking presumed that people act independently on the basis of all the information they can gather. And due to this assumption, markets are always in balance. Well, as you might imagine, the failure of the financial markets throughout the world in 2008 called into question the neoclassical school of thinking, which had been guiding the markets for some time. But despite what you might think, even after the financial crisis and earthquake of 2008, the neoclassical way of thinking is still a powerful force in decision-making, and one could even say it is the basis for how business works today. Because of this belief, rationally motivated behavior is still used to make predictions about the quantity of goods that get produced and the prices with which they will be sold. But fortunately for us all, some enlightened thought has emerged on the horizon, even within business economic circles. And this enlightened thought has even gone so far as to suggest that when we teach MBA students like you and I economics, we should also emphasize the importance of avoiding profit maximizing activities that may in fact harm society as a large. Enter stage left, behavioral economics. And that's a theatrical way of saying that a new way of thinking about market behavior is emerging. And a new way is emerging because, according to the neoclassical view of economics that we just discussed a moment ago, consumers, workers, and companies make rational calculations about what is in their own best interest. But increasingly, economists are wondering if in fact we are all rationally motivated. Now, to help us consider if in fact we are all rationally motivated, let's return again to the time machine and revisit Cupertino, California on the day of the first iPhone release. Apple introduced the iPhone on June 20th of that year at a price point of $600. $200 above what we discussed earlier. But very soon after that launch, Apple quickly reduced the price to $400, which was the rational price we arrived at in the previous video. Now, why did Apple do that? Why did they introduce the iPhone at $600 and shortly after that reduce it to $400? What do you think? Why did they do that? Well, in fact, Apple made that decision because they used an alternative approach to pricing the iPhone. And by alternative, we mean that Apple were not only following the principles of neoclassical economics and rational decision making, but in fact, their novel approach to pricing the iPhone was based on the principles of behavioral economics, which we will discuss in the next video.